The cabin of Flight 792 hummed with the quiet rhythm of jet engines as it cruised high above the Pacific. Outside, the endless ocean shimmered beneath a blanket of golden sunlight. Inside, passengers scrolled through phones, read magazines, or slept against their windows, blissfully unaware that history was quietly sitting among them. In seat 14A, a woman in her early 30s stared out at the clouds, expression calm yet distant. She wore a plain gray jacket, a faded Air Force patch barely visible on her sleeve, a detail most passengers never noticed. Her short, neat hair and sharp eyes gave her a composed, disciplined look. But there was something else, a stillness that came from someone who had seen far too much. Her boarding pass read Ana Reyes, though that wasn't the name people once knew her by. The flight attendants moved down the aisles with polite smiles, serving coffee and snacks. Ana nodded politely but declined. She wasn't afraid of flying, far from it. Flying was once her world. Yet there was a strange ache in her chest as she listened to the hum of the engines. It reminded her of a life she'd buried years ago. The air bases, the night sorties, the call signs shouted across radio channels. Specter. That was what they used to call her. Halfway through the flight, the calm was broken. A faint announcement crackled over the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, if there's a doctor on board, please make yourself known to the crew. A ripple of concern moved through the cabin. The captain had collapsed in the cockpit, unconscious and unresponsive. The co-pilot, young and visibly shaken, was suddenly responsible for 200 lives, and heavy turbulence was closing in. Anna's head lifted immediately. Her instincts, the same ones that had guided her through years of aerial combat, switched on. She unbuckled her seatbelt and quietly stepped into the aisle, ignoring the startled looks from nearby passengers. Up front, the first officer's voice was trembling over the radio, calling air traffic control for assistance. Mayday, mayday, this is Flight 792, captain is incapacitated, requesting immediate vectors to nearest airfield. Far out in the distance, 2 F-22 Raptors on a Pacific patrol picked up the distress call. Their leader, Eagle 1, responded with calm precision. Flight 792, this is U.S. Air Force patrol flight. We copy your emergency. Please identify your current position. The young co-pilot tried to answer, but panic laced his words. The radio crackled, static, confusion, then silence. Anna stepped into the cockpit doorway, her voice steady and cold. Eagle 1, this is civilian Flight 792, she said into the microphone, her hand firm on the controls. Medical emergency on board. We're declaring priority landing. The F-22 pilot froze. That voice, the tone, the control, it was impossible to mistake. He leaned forward in disbelief. Specter? He whispered. The woman gave a small, quiet nod to herself. After all these years, the skies had just remembered her name. The air crackled with static before her voice came through again. Clear, calm, unshaken. Eagle 1, this is civilian Flight 792. I repeat, medical emergency on board. Need vectors to nearest runway. For a brief moment, silence filled the skies. Thousands of feet below, passengers sat unaware of the connection that had just reignited above the Pacific. A voice from the past, reaching through radio waves like a ghost. Inside the cockpit of the lead F-22 Raptor, Captain Ryan Cole, call sign Eagle 1, blinked hard, unsure if he'd heard correctly. That voice, he knew it. Years ago, during his first combat training in Nevada, there was one instructor who'd terrified and inspired every pilot on base. She flew like lightning, spoke like steel, and never missed a shot. Her name was Captain Ana Specter Reyes, the legend who disappeared after a classified operation went wrong. Who's speaking? Ryan asked, voice unsteady for the first time in years. The response came without hesitation. Call sign Specter, formerly U.S. Air Force. The second Raptor, Eagle 2, turned sharply in disbelief. Did she just say Specter? Ryan didn't answer immediately. He was staring at his radar screen, the blinking dot that represented Flight 792, descending slowly and erratically. He keyed the radio again, his heart pounding. Specter, this is Eagle 1. Confirm your location and flight status. Anna's voice was all business. We're maintaining 31,000 feet, losing altitude due to turbulence. Captain's unconscious. Co-pilot's young, holding steady but panicking. "I've taken partial control." Her composure was absolute, every word measured, every second precious. It was the same tone she'd used when she led combat formations through anti-air fire. Even now, miles above the Pacific, her instincts had returned like muscle memory. "Copy that, Specter," Ryan replied. "Anchorage runway's your best shot. We'll guide you in. You're not alone up here." "Roger that, Eagle One," she said. "Feels like old times." He smiled faintly behind his oxygen mask. Old times. Those old times had made her a legend and nearly cost her her life. The last mission she flew years ago had been top secret. Rumors said she'd disobeyed a direct order to save her squadron from an ambush. She'd succeeded, but she vanished afterward, stripped of her title and buried by bureaucracy. Some said she died. Others said she simply walked away from the sky she loved. But now here she was, flying again, leading again, saving lives again. Ryan's voice grew firm. "Specter, we're locking on to your coordinates. Stay steady on your current heading. We'll clear the airspace around you." "Understood," she replied, hands steady on the controls. For a long moment, the only sound was the hum of the engines and the wind brushing against metal. Then Eagle 2's voice came quietly through the comms. "Eagle 1, I can't believe it. It's her. The ghost of Kadena Base." Ryan exhaled slowly, eyes fixed on the airliner ahead. "She's no ghost," he said. "She's the reason we're still flying." And as the two Raptors flanked Flight 792, the skies themselves seemed to stand at attention, saluting the return of Specter. Specter didn't waste a second. The moment she stepped into the cockpit, the air changed. Panic was thick. The young co-pilot's hands were trembling on the yoke, his breathing uneven, eyes darting between instruments that were beginning to flash red. Outside, clouds were swelling into a turbulent storm wall, the kind that could tear a commercial jet apart if handled wrong. "Easy," she said firmly, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "Take your hands off the throttle." The co-pilot looked at her, startled. Who are you?" "Someone who knows how to keep us in the sky," she replied, already sliding into the captain's seat. She adjusted the seat height, fingers flying across the panels like a pianist finding an old rhythm. Trim, flaps, rudder control, all instinct. It was as if the years she'd spent away from the cockpit had evaporated in seconds. The plane jolted violently as it hit a downdraft. A few screams echoed from the cabin. Oxygen masks swung from the ceiling, a haunting reminder of what could happen next. Specter gritted her teeth and pushed the yoke forward slightly, leveling the wings. "Flight 792 to Eagle 1, we're hitting rough air. Need guidance vectors to Anchorage." "Copy that, Specter," came Ryan's voice, calm and steady. "We're with you. Stay on heading 265. You're doing fine." Outside, through sheets of rain and flashes of lightning, the two F-22 Raptors appeared, sleek silver predators slicing through the storm. They dropped altitude until they were flying alongside the airliner, one on each side like guardians. From her cockpit window, Specter could see their silhouettes. One of them rolled his aircraft slightly in salute. It wasn't just a gesture, it was recognition. Ryan's voice came again, softer this time. "Flight 792, this is Eagle 1. It's an honor flying with you again, ma'am." Specter exhaled slowly, her lips curving into a faint smile. "Let's bring them home safe." The co-pilot stared at her, still in awe. "You're military?" he asked. "Used to be," she said without looking up. "Long time ago." The instruments flickered again, altitude dropping fast. Specter's voice remained calm. "Fuel balance looks uneven. Crossfeed open, right tank compensating. Retrim to neutral." The young co-pilot followed her commands automatically. His fear began to fade, replaced by focus. She was teaching him without words, the way old mentors do in moments that matter. Below, the sea was invisible under the dark clouds. The world had shrunk to a cockpit full of flickering lights and the sound of her steady breathing. Ryan and his wingmen matched the airliner's movements perfectly. From their canopies, they could see her, hands steady, eyes sharp, framed by the glow of warning lights. To them, it was like watching a legend step back into her throne. "Specter," Ryan said over the comms. "Anchorage Tower has cleared runway 7R for emergency approach. You'll have full priority on landing. Understood, she replied. Tell them to keep the lights bright. I'm bringing in a heavy bird. And as lightning flashed across the clouds, illuminating her determined face, it was clear that the ghost of the skies had truly returned. She wasn't flying for medals, or orders or recognition. She was flying for every soul aboard that plane. The storm began to thin as Flight 792 neared Anchorage. Through breaks in the clouds, faint streaks of gold shimmered, the first light of dawn pushing through the storm's shadow. Inside the cockpit, the tension was thick, but under Specter's command, order had returned. Every motion she made was precise, deliberate, the kind of steady control that only came from years of flying under pressure. Anchorage Tower, this is Flight 792, she radioed. We are on final approach, emergency landing. Captain incapacitated. Requesting priority clearance. The tower responded instantly. Flight 792, you are clear to land runway 7 right. Fire and medical crews are standing by. Welcome home. Home. The word struck her chest like a quiet echo. She hadn't heard that word from anyone in years. Not since she'd walked away from the military, leaving behind her rank, her squadron, and the sky she loved. Outside, the F-22 Raptors flew tight alongside her, their wings gleaming under flashes of lightning. The storm was dying, but the turbulence still shook the jet violently. She gripped the controls firmly, eyes locked on the blinking runway lights ahead. Eagle 1, she said over the radio, her voice steady. Hold formation until I touch down. If this bird breaks apart, you know what to do. Ryan's reply came quick. Negative, ma'am. We're not leaving your side, she smiled faintly. Still stubborn as ever, Captain Cole. The altimeter ticked down, 3,000 feet, 2,000, 1,000. Rain streaked across the windshield, and the co-pilot's breathing grew ragged again. Specter placed a hand on his shoulder. Focus on the instruments, not the fear. You're a pilot. Trust your machine. The plane dipped slightly as a gust hit the nose. Alarms chimed, but her reaction was immediate. A gentle correction, a controlled descent. The jet leveled perfectly with the runway centerline. Outside, the two F-22s broke formation, pulling upward into the clouds, giving her room to land. Their part was done. Now it was her moment. Anchorage Tower, Flight 792. Final descent. Gear down. Copy. Flight 792. Winds calm. You're looking good. The wheels touched the ground with a soft thump. The tires screeched, sending mist curling behind them as reverse thrust roared to life. The massive jet slowed, the storm finally fading into quiet. When the engines powered down, the silence was broken by a wave of applause from the cabin. Passengers cheered, cried, and clapped, a sound that filled the aircraft like a heartbeat returning to life. Specter leaned back in the seat, exhaling deeply. Her hands, once steady as iron, trembled slightly now that the danger was over. She looked at the unconscious captain being lifted by medics and whispered, "You're going to be fine, sir." As she stepped off the jet, her boots met the wet tarmac. The morning light spilled across the runway, pure, golden, and soft. In front of her stood the two F-22 pilots, helmets off, rain glistening on their flight suits. Both stood rigidly at attention, saluting her in silence. For a long moment, Specter didn't move. The salute wasn't for her rank, it was for what she represented. Courage, sacrifice, and the return of a name they thought the sky had lost. She returned the salute slowly, her eyes steady but filled with emotion she couldn't voice. In that golden morning, with the storm finally behind her, Captain Anna Specter Reyes didn't need medals or recognition. The salute of two Raptors and the safe landing of two unarmed souls were enough. She turned her gaze skyward, the clouds, parting above like curtains on a stage, she once commanded, and smiled faintly. She had once vanished into silence. But tonight the skies remembered her name.